This is Synchronicity.
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 Welcome to episode 11 of Synchronicity Podcast. 11 episodes? Well, I actually had to look up. I didn't know I had already done 10 of these. It's been really fun. So I know I point that out almost every single podcast, but it's been a good time. My guest today, Michael Donovan. Might remember Michael Donovan because he used to be on MindPod Network. I still consider Michael a part of MindPod Network, even though he's not officially. We can make that clear, but in spirit, he is. Speaking of spirit, I didn't plan that segue. This is just I'm not great at the segues, but when I do them, I like to point them out. This conversation today, Michael starts by being extremely difficult. And I have to cajole him into giving me answers because he didn't like that I had questions. He wanted it to be a conversational format, and he wanted to talk about what he wanted to talk about. And then he started asking me questions, which I actually think turned out pretty well. And I'm not opposed to it, but I did want to find out a few things about Michael and why he does some of the things he does. Because I find him to be, I've only known Michael for a year and a half, 2 years now, but one of my good friends now. And I'm always impressed with his kind of his inquisitiveness and just actually not a lot of bullshit with Michael. He's not interested in putting on like any type of, he's not trying to impress anyone, although what he does is impressive. He's a photographer, makes really awesome stuff. Really just an incredibly creative and talented guy beyond just being a photographer. His mind works in a way that I think is pretty impressive. My role in this podcast is primarily trying to, and you'll hear me say this, is to keep us on track because we can just go off on tangents and talk about that, which is why I came up with questions, Michael, if you're listening. So it was to keep things on track because otherwise it would have been like another 2.5 hours of us talking about God knows what. All right. So what else are we talking about in this podcast? Michael's been going around recently, and he does these, I don't know what you call them, experiments, but they're not. He's just doing them. I get it. If I was just like, okay, here's an example. He's going around and asking people, who he comes across with at a party or whatever, saying, how's your quality of life? Which is, I think that's a great question. That's a really, really good question to ask people because I don't think it's a common question people get. And I think it actually makes people think about what they're doing and how their life is. And that's a nice thing to do. You always need to, I think that's not always, but it's good to ask yourself that. He's interested in people and the connections that people make, and he really, that has been, since I've known him, kind of like the singular thread of my experience with him. And I'm incredibly appreciative for him as a friend because he makes me think about things in a different way. His drive is very impressive and it keeps me going. And he's just like a good person to have around to talk to because he's funny too. That's always important. So then we talk about so much stuff. Donald Trump, being grateful, not necessarily for Donald Trump, but if you could do that, you've done it. You've mastered it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say there is about Michael. He's a good guy. He does a lot of really cool stuff. He has his own podcast. Haven't mentioned that. Called Walking Home. Check that out. I have mentioned it in previous podcasts. I don't think he listens to all my podcasts, which is okay. I don't listen to all of his podcasts, but I do listen to it a lot. So without no, not so. I changed my mind. Not so. Reviews have been coming in on iTunes, and I cannot tell you the joy it brings me to read I don't want to sound sarcastic here. I'm not. I really, really appreciate it. If anything was going to keep me doing this podcast, if it was like, let's say it was just destroying my life, it was just horrible for everyone, myself, me, around me. It's not. It's great. But let's say it was, what would actually keep me doing it is seeing these beautiful, lovely comments that you guys are leaving. So leaving. So if you want to help, or you like the podcast, rate and review it on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, or send me an email at nlampert@Piedmont Network. Nope, that's not it. That's wrong. Send me an email at nlampert@mindpodnetwork.com and talk. Cool. Okay, Michael Donovan, buckle up. Bye-bye. Okay, first question. We're starting. Boom. Starting.
Oh, wait. You
No.
say hello to me or anything, or you
No.
just start?
Well, thank you for coming on. That's all you get. No, we're gonna
Welcome
start.
back.
Welcome
Hello,
back
Mind
to
Pod.
the
back from the
return.
dead.
It's the revenge of Michael Donovan. That's what the name. I'm gonna call it that. That's what I'm gonna call
Revenge
this
of
one.
Michael Donovan.
Yeah.
All right. Let's
All
do
right.
this.
Well, thank you seriously though for coming on. I really appreciate it. It is
I'm really
always
happy
fun.
that you took me out of timeout and let me
I
join.
did. You're out of
No.
the corner. You know, have to
Yeah.
wear the cap anymore. Okay, so I'm gonna do an intro, so there'll be background on who you are. But I want to hear. You know what I'd love from you, because we've been friends for a while now, a couple years. Give me a biography of where you grew up and how you got to where you are now. And you can be as general, as specific, or as cagey as you want to be.
Well, I don't know if I can't do a bio really. I don't feel comfortable doing bios because then it's just like within the moment you're saying like, this is who I was and this is what's remarkable about me, or this is what I'm attached to. So I feel funny about doing bios. I can say I grew up in Spokane.
Okay. Keep going.
And
Keep going. Follow with
Grew
that.
up in Spokane, and then I left, and I lived in Portland, and I don't see. That's the thing, is that I don't know. Does it? Can I ask why it matters?
Yeah, you can ask whatever you want. I don't have to answer you. No, typically I'll tell you why I start with this question. I've been starting it with a lot of people.
Yeah.
One, I think it's interesting and a little revealing, not in hopefully an off-putting way, what people say about their history, because it's a super vague question, right? Like,
That's the thing. That's why
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable about asking that. Is because my bio today is going to be different than my bio. My bio right now is going to be different than my bio in 2 hours. I've changed the bio on my website probably a good 20 to 30 times at least.
know.
Not kidding. Within the past 2 or 3 years, only because
you're trying to figure out what to highlight and what's important. No, but my question
it depends on like it's like who's your market kind of thing.
Here's what I'll say about the question and how maybe you could answer it like this: is the things that people say related to when I ask the question, how did you traverse decades of your life to get to where you are now? It is informative not only in terms of like the touch points that people give, but where they define themselves as being now. You, I know, are going to be a little elusive to pin down on this question, but I would like
Why
to
do you know that? Why do you know that?
I don't know. My question is this though: is give a rundown. What are the highlights? Give me some highlights from your journey from Spokane to where you are now, cat sitting for a cat.
Highlights. See, that's the thing, is even the highlights, there's a bunch that flash through my mind, but it's all, you're not going to nail me down on this one, man.
Just give me something, Michael. What, I'm just going to have to burn through my the most difficult guess.
This is the thing. I know you really want me to answer this question, but
Yeah.
I have to sum up. I just finished this book called Original Thinking, and it actually talks about going back to the origin. The origin of everything.
Okay.
Of everything, like about life, and how origin is more about like where you're at, the place that you're at, the time and the place that you're at.
Okay.
And it deconstructs time as well. So you're asking me to basically talk about something that I've just deconstructed over the course of.
Build it back up, my friend. This such is life.
The thing is, I can't build it back up because after reading this book was like, have you ever read Ishmael?
Yes, that's Daniel Quinn. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This book is the new Ishmael.
Oh, cool. Is this the one you sent me? Is this the one you sent me, or is that a different one? That's a different book you sent.
I might have sent it to you.
Here's the question. I got a question for you. At some point, you were somewhat averse to reading books, if I remember, not too long ago. So
yeah, you know what happened is I changed my debit card. Here's a highlight of my life.
There you go.
They have the banks change your debit card, so you have the new chip.
Yeah. Yes, I have this annoying chip that is super annoing. Yeah.
Super slow. So
and they make you use the other. Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah.
Well, all of my accounts were linked to my old accounts, to my old debit cards.
Yes.
So every subscription that I had basically was canceled along the way. And then I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of nice because now I only need to resubscribe to the things that are important to me.
That's nice.
But one of them was Netflix was canceled. And I was like, do I really need Netflix anymore? And I went on Hulu and I was watching South Park. But what really was important to me was I was like, I wanted to get information because mostly I watch documentaries. So I subscribed to Curiosity Stream, and I sent some links to you on that.
Yeah.
That has really opened up my mind. And then from there, it was like, I really wanted to get into books again because okay, so this is part of the background is that I got rid of everything that I own except for my duffel bag, my backpack, and my suitcase with a little bit of stuff in storage. But I basically don't own anything anymore. So I'm very cautious about where I spend my money because I just don't want to spend money. And so, I just did a trip to Seattle for some work and I was like, do I buy something here? Do I buy something here? At the end of the day, it's like I'm just buying things that I can carry or travel with.
The bare necessities of what
bare necessities. And my luxury is books, but I only own 3 books. So in order for me to buy a new book, I have to finish one.
Right. And give it away to someone.
Have to trade it or give it away. So today I just finished this book, Original Thinking, and then I picked up a new one called Sacred Economy, which is about like how we're going through this transitional economy into everything that we think and we believe and that we understand. I would say that you and I, about how the world should be.
Yes.
Basically, if you look at a lot of the stuff that...
When you say the world should be, you mean like Donald Trump in charge of everything. That's what
absolutely.
Right.
Donald Trump just fucking us in the brain balls. No, but everything that you and I have talked about before, not everything, but I mean, we've kind of touched on this, and maybe this is more of my hippie thoughts, but that everything should be more equal. If I want to play on an Xbox, I should be able to play on an Xbox, and I shouldn't have to worry about, and I'm saying me, it's like any person should be able to decide, like, do you want to play a video game? Do you have the money for it? Or do you have to go to work? Like everybody, there's more flow.
Yes, sure.
So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question.
No. Why are you you did, because you're reading more because now you have this policy of 3. Here's something I really love about you is you always have these interesting either thought experiments or real life experiments going on, and many simultaneously. And I really like this book idea because I have, 150 books that are 3/4 of the way read or some way through the read, and they're all on my nightstand, and then they're in some other places. And I read them. Like I usually don't just drop them. I mean, sometimes I'll read a book and be like, I'm never going to read this book. Like that's happened to me. But I like your idea of having to, before you can get a new book, because if you're downscaling or downsizing rather, you have to finish it before you get another one and give it away or trade it in, which is pretty sweet. But why all of a sudden? Because so you watch some stuff and now you want to read?
No, because I want to get more informed. But when you have, it's just like anything else. When you have the internet in front of you, it's like you're really gonna learn from that thing.
Well, I mean, the internet, right? It's neutral though. Like there's really
it's
good
neutral,
stuff.
But I'm talking about, are you really gonna invest your time into educating yourself? You're going to for a portion of your time, and then you're gonna get distracted with this or that.
It's much easier to get distracted on the web learning something.
So
yes.
So now what I do is I put earplugs in my ear, not earbuds, but earplugs to drown out the sound so I don't hear anything. And I'll sit down and I'll drink some coffee and I'll plow through a book.
That's so awesome. I'm really happy to hear this because I literally remember recommending, not that you would read those particular books, but I'd be like, hey, here's this awesome book. Here's this awesome book. And you're like, I'm not going to read that. I'm watching YouTube clips. That's where I'm getting my information. It's like, But I like the transition. And I've noticed you've been sending me more and more stuff related to consciousness. So, okay, this leads me to another question. Look, man, I got questions. This isn't even off my sheet. Yeah. So I know you've been going around, and you've mentioned this a few times to me, and I think various places in social media, and asking people what their quality of life is like. So can you explain why you're asking that and what you mean and what you've noticed by asking that to various people? So explain the genesis of that.
Okay, so background, I went to LA thinking that I could not. I basically, New York was dissolving in front of me, the New York that I knew and that I wanted it to be. So I moved from New York to LA. And the first thing that I realized, the first day that I was there, I was swimming in a pool, and I was like, this is fucking life. Like, this is what life is meant to be.
Yeah, I remember seeing all these Instagrams.
Yeah.
yeah. It was
just
awesome.
that, and I was shooting and having a good time, and it was just, everything was just wonderful and beautiful and amazing. But the quality of life was really high. And when you talk to the people that are there, that's the conversation is, the quality of life here in LA is way better than it is in New York. Well, that's because people talk about the quality of life over there. Here in New York, everybody talks about New York. And in Spokane, people don't talk about the quality of life. People in Portland talk about kind of like what you're doing. People in Chicago, it's definitely about what you're doing. So some cities, they talk about the quality of life. And some cities, the culture is about the city. Some it's about weather. Some it's about nature. But when you talk about the quality of life, then people can get into hobbies. They can get into what they're learning about, maybe the work is their big thing, but the quality of life question, and part of it too is because I was thrown back in when I moved back to New York. I was thrown back into, okay, I gotta hustle, because you know how it is in New York. Like, either you're doing really well or you could be doing better. So, and I wanted to be doing very well, so I jumped back into the game, and I went to a magazine launch for this magazine I originally had started, and then I left them, and so they're still friends and everything, and they have a new issue out, and I had some images in there. So I went to this launch, and as I was catching up to you, I was like, first as how are you doing, or what's going on, what's new, and it was all about this, like, mask came on about, oh, everything's amazing, everything's doing great, everything's wonderful. Life is, work is so fucking great. I'm doing this, and I have 2 kids now, and they're both awesome, and it just became this, like, oh God, it's so disgusting to be near you. You know what I mean? It's like, you're so fucking perfect. And then basically everybody was trying to be a Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is just a representation of that aspect that we all carry at one point through our development.
Everyone has a little, no one wants to hear this, but everyone has a little Donald Trump inside of them.
Fuck yeah.
Which hopefully does not conjure an image of, like, a very miniature sized Donald Trump having sex with people. But, but everyone does have that whatever, that je ne sais quoi that he possesses. Everyone has that.
Yeah, and before I even move on, I gotta say this. If you actually, I should let your listeners know, if they want to hear the best podcast in the entire world, the best podcast, they should go to Walking Home and subscribe to that.
You realize I'm just gonna bleep all that out. It's just gonna be cut right out of it. No, people know. Here, so what you don't know is, in the past couple episodes, I've been big upping your podcast in the natural flow of conversation, I might point out. But yeah. So, okay, Donald Trump, quality of life, talking about quality of life. This is just to the listeners out there, my main goal with this podcast is to make sure that me and Michael follow a seemingly coherent train of thought for about 60 minutes or so. So far, we're doing okay.
My job is to disrupt that.
Yeah. Okay, but
my job is to disrespect you on the MindPod network.
We're gonna get into MindPod Network soon, but okay. So go into continue the quality of life thing. So you notice people putting on
the quality of life thing was just because it is an aspect of life, and it opens up more interesting discussions. So in some cases, some of the examples that I got, just using that night alone, it was really cool, because one of them was this. So, we're standing in a group, and I'm wearing earplugs, by the way, at this launch. So I can only hear the people who are directly in front of me. So I'm not distracted. So I'm extremely present. And I will encourage people to experiment with earplugs as well, because you can then, I'm like the oddball Tim Ferriss here. Where he's like biohacking himself. I'm like, wear earplugs to a magazine launch.
Put that in your biography. Put the oddball Timothy Ferris. There you go.
Well, I gotta like, I can't be associated exactly like him, because I don't want to, like, be that guy. But,
yeah, sure. But
anyway, so I'm asking, how's your quality of life? And this girl says, oh, actually, it's really fucking good. I finally found balance. And so she was really happy to share. And I noticed, like, afterwards, that I was not really tuned into hearing that. I was like, what are you talking about? It's balance. But now I recognize that, okay, that's actually somebody I should be talking to.
An answer, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a different experiment or a different thing I'm playing with, but I'm how you're basically you're you're a sum of the people, the 5 people
I've
you're
heard
closest
this.
with.
Yes, this is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of reevaluating exactly who I want to spend the most amount of time with. And then so you have, like, your closest friends, and then you have your ancillary friends. And, what I'm trying to do is, when I hear somebody say, oh, I have a balanced life, then it's like, okay, zero in on this person and ask them a lot of questions, because this person probably can lead me to a better way than this other person who I asked maybe like a few minutes later. And she said, when I said, how's your quality of life? She's like, oh my God, actually, it's terrible. It's like, and it was like the first person who's ever asked her, like really asked her seriously, like, how are you doing? Because we all asked, a minute ago, someone asked her, how are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm doing great.
Good,
Work's
yeah,
great.
great.
School,
Yeah.
Yeah. But so it's like, in that case, then I have to decide, okay, well, is this something that I can ask that person a question, can kind of lead them toward the next step? Because I've learned too that I can't help everybody.
Yes,
Because
that's a really important thing to learn.
Closest to.
This is the part of the podcast where Michael's Skype got all Skypey and started to break up, so I'm going to fade in with me reiterating what he said and getting back to what he was saying, which was about helping people. Okay, you enjoy. Talk about what you were saying. Like, you're just doing things, you don't know why you're doing them, but they're happening, and
they're just happening, and so life is just happening, and then I'm just watching it and just letting it do its thing. And what I was saying before too is that it's uncomfortable to say, but there's a certain kind of bravery that I'm learning to develop and nourish, because it's so easy to just plug in and follow the status quo. And there's a few people out there there's lots of people out there that are doing something different, or trying to look at the world in a different way. But it starts to break out between the theory and then the actual practice.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
I think one thing about spirituality is it's about the human spirit, or it's about the spirit. It's about the spirit. So it's like, it's the human spirit, the animal spirit, the spirit of the rocks, the
earth,
fire, the water, everything. The spirit of time. It's all this bigger spirit. And so to be somebody that just accepts that and then works it out, it's kind of like, I think my frustration with science, and how science, like,
sure,
well, let's point at the Big Bang and this is what happened, and
absolutely.
It's like, well, that's a theory. And science, my science friends will say, well, no, this is the truth, this is the reality. And it's the same thing as somebody that's pointing to the Bhagavad Gita and saying, this is the truth.
Right. This is the fundamental.
It's the same thing as someone pointing to the Bible. It's like, okay, so we're talking religion here, which means that we're talking stories. Let's not call it myth. Let's call it stories, which means that it's it's just more stories. So why not be our own stories and live our own stories, and then also try to dig deeper and find deeper stories.
So I like what you're saying, two very complicated things here too, which is, I agree with, I have also, and we've spoken about this, and I'm continuously amazed that science, and I'm very appreciative of all the amazing breakthroughs science has offered, and I don't mean to admonish it as an entire category and way of thinking, but the definition of science is you're always improving upon what has been built, or you're a radical reassessment of what has been done, like Einstein's theory of relativity.
Isn't it to learn? Isn't that what science comes from? Is the root is to learn? So if it's to learn, that doesn't necessarily mean proving your theory correct.
But this is like a lot of things in the world now. A lot of these systems, like the scientific, academic world, they're systematic. They run in a certain way. They run sometimes for money with grants. They run sometimes for research, trying to help things. They run to know more about the world, but oftentimes that can devolve into just people trying to, do science for a particular thing and not necessarily have an impact on the world for the good. Now, the other thing you said is spirituality, right? You mentioned that, myths and stories. One of the things that I've always gravitated towards with spirituality stuff, or these mystic side of things, the mysticism of it, is the ability of these stories and myths not only to relate, to connect kind of personal experiences to a more universal experience, but also as their ability to function kind of as metaphors or, microcosms or macrocosm stories of what we experience on, a daily basis, whether we recognize it or not. What I'm ultimately interested in is, the fusion of those two concepts, which is why it's very encouraging to see someone like the Dalai Lama say that, listen, if science proves any aspect of Buddhism wrong, I mean, he says this tongue in cheek, truthfully, but he says if science proves any aspect of Buddhism wrong, we'll change it. Like, we're not going to be dogmatic about this, but he says that because he knows, many of the underlying concepts in Buddhism were achieved and found through a very different way, but still fundamentally hold true. So I definitely hear what you're saying. I mean, one of the issues that I've noticed, and this is what I really wanted to talk to you about, because this relates to what was going on with MindPod Network and, what you're doing with your podcast too, is kind of labeling things as spiritual in a category and then not spiritual in a category, right? Like, well, this is spiritual, but this isn't. And that's something I would like to hear you kind of talk about. Like, what do you think that's about? What do you think the potential pitfalls of that are? And can you give kind of a brief definition of what you think spirituality is, past being of the spirit? What does it mean to you?
Well, once I got terminated by the spiritual terminator from MindPod, and I blew a gasket for a moment, I think I said to you that all that this shit is it's something to pick you up when you're down. It's all. And I think back to when I was a kid and I got, and you asked the initial question of like, tell me where you're from. And I think about one of the first awards. I always got awards in school, and, it was for, the best student of the month award, student of the week award, like all of those. And then I'd get most inspirational. And I think that is just about picking people up. So to me, part of the spiritual thing is that, you're going to have some ups and downs. It's 2016. People are going to have ups and downs for the next year. The next 365 days, good shit's going to happen and bad shit's going to happen. And all this spirituality is just saying like, well, the bad shit will happen and you'll get back up.
And I mean, it's one of the functions for sure. I mean, do you think that's the only function of it? Or, I mean,
you have spiritual experience, or someone would call it a religious experience. I mean, there's more to it, but I mean, when it all boils down to it, it's just that life happens. We're just living life. We don't know what this is. It's all just entertainment.
Well, what I would say is this, is when you ask someone a question like, what is the quality of your life? That to me is, and spiritual again, is I'm asking you a question, to define spirituality that I truthfully would probably have a very hard time defining what that is, even in my life. But when you ask a question like that, what is your quality of life? That is the essence of trying to connect, which I believe is a manifestation of trying to help people, right? I mean, that's what we're all trying to do here. I do think that there's a lot of entertainment that happens in life, but ultimately what we're all would be ideal, obviously, you mentioned this before, when things are a little more equal and a little more fair, is we want to make the world kind of a better place, because we see things at times where it's like, well, that could be done a little bit better, and how to, really affect change, not only in the external world, but internally, I do see as a benefit. But I want to be clear, like, I don't mean that it has to be you're studying the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible or Taoism or any spiritual thing or astrology or anything you would label as quote unquote spiritual. It can be, watching sports. It could be listening to a piece of music or a band. It could be going out in nature. Like, these are things that I all think are spiritual or of this same quality that we're talking about.
You know what it is? This is all just a commercial for life. So we don't know where the hell we came from before we were here. We don't know where we're going afterwards. We don't understand any of this stuff. We really don't even understand a river. We think that we understand what it is, but it's like, okay, explain to me what water is again and how it all doesn't just all connect and turn into a solid, and then sometimes it does, it freezes, and then it evaporates, and it all flows, and it what the fuck is this? And it can corrode rocks, or it can, we don't even know what the hell that is.
Right.
And we don't even know if we're going to end up becoming a water molecule that's maybe when we die, we'll become a water molecule in a river, maybe in a stream, maybe in an ocean, maybe we'll become a star. We don't know any of this shit. So, I like to, one of the questions I've been playing with lately too and asking people is, do you remember when you were a kid and you think about what life was like before you were born? And, this is probably before we had language skills, and we would kind of think about, oh yeah, that place that I was before. And if someone asked you as a small child before you had language skills, you might be able to describe it, but we lose that because we're caught up in looking at the wind, moving branches and trees and stuff. It's all so confusing. Anyway, the whole thing is that at one point, I think that there's a commercial for life, and we're all just trying to sell life. So for some people, it's like, look how beautiful it is when you have people doing yoga. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't it beautiful somebody going to a rock concert and drinking beer and having a good time with their friends? Like, it all looks like a commercial. And and that's essentially what I think it is that just all of this stuff is just, it's like live.
I know. I mean, I've
enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think about that too. Like, one of the first words that I learned as a kid was the word commercial. I remember asking my mom, we were in front of the television. I said, Mom, what is this? And she says, it's a commercial. And it's like, was she talking about what was on television, or was she talking about life? And so now I'm just like, you know what? That's what life is. Life is just a big commercial. So just enjoy it, because it's like, it's going to be highs and it's going to be lows. It's like this 86-year-old commercial.
Well, and it's like, how do you deal, and that's one of the things we were talking just about the Dalai Lama, or I was briefly, Buddhism, it's suffering, right? The alleviation, it's first the acknowledgement that suffering exists. It's a thing. These are the components of it. And then eventually the alleviation of suffering, not only for yourself, but for everyone. And I think one of the things that you're describing is a lot of people, everyone is going to have ups and downs in life, regardless, right? I mean, it's inevitable. You cannot be shielded from that in any way, shape, or form. But it's what tools do you use to be aware of why those sufferings happen, and those tragedies or mini tragedies or whatever they are, and then how do you deal with them in a way that makes it a little bit easier, something to grasp onto. And I think there's a lot of different approaches to that, which leads me to another question I have for you is, I know you've done ayahuasca and you've done DMT, and I would like to, as someone, I have not done ayahuasca or DMT. I know many people will have. I'd like you to give kind of a brief overview of your personal experience with ayahuasca and, just your personal experience with it.
I mean, I've done it a few times. I've done it mostly in New York, sometimes Brooklyn. I wanted to make sure that the two counties are separated. But no, I've done it several times, and my personal experience is that it's just been good. It's been good.
Nice, very descriptive, Michael. Thank you for that.
Well,
Next question.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing. Go describe the atmosphere to me.
Sure.
Go describe how a tree goes
give me some. I'm asking you as a friend, not even for the podcast. I haven't done ayahuasca. I am interested in it. I haven't had the calling, so to speak, to do it, which I know a lot of people have. Some people don't, and they do it otherwise. But I'm not asking you to sell it to me, but describe what the actual experience was like. Give me a breakdown of one of those times you've done it.
Well, that's the thing, is that every experience is different. Every experience is different, and I mean, it's really hard to just sum up pretty quickly.
Sure. I get that.
To a talking point, if you go to Walking Home Podcast, there's actually been a few episodes that we've done where I've taken friends who we've done a podcast the night before they've done ayahuasca, and then the day after we have a discussion, or I've done it and then had episodes. You know, those are like
Again, I'm
3-4
bleeping all
hours.
of this out. I'm not.
No,
There's
but
no
I'm
self-promotion on my show. So it's just going to be cut out.
Well, no, I'm telling you because for real, it's like, you know, that's 3-4 hours that we've been able to talk about
It's
this
and
stuff.
I mean that jokingly, of course. There is
Yeah.
some really, really good conversations about it. But you know,
But-
I've had a couple people come on. I had Dennis McKenna, I had Alan Badiner, you know, and they gave some general and some personal experiences with it. But I would love to hear one of your personal experiences with
Fine,
it.
bleep
Give me
that shit
something for fuck's sake, Jesus, Michael.
Fine, bleep it out. Basically, my experience, again, every experience I've had has been different.
Sure.
They all kind of build up on top of each other. You know, the last one I had was the roughest one, but it was also it was a very strong experience, and a very powerful experience. It was very interesting and unique experience. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I can give you examples. Which one would you rather hear about, the books, or would you rather hear about the alien spacecraft, or would you rather hear about the female orgasm? These are all three different.
Man, I can't hear about all of those. Can I pick two of the three?
Conversation with no, because they're so long. You know what I mean? It'll take
I don't
me
care. That's okay. They sound pretty good. So
pick one.
I'm gonna go with alien spacecrafts.
So alien spacecraft was the last one that I did, and that one was fucking weird. That one I basically, after we drank it, we're sitting around and it's waiting for it to kick, and it finally kicked in, and when it did, I realized you know, this thing was kind of building up, and then I realized that we were on this spacecraft. You know, everybody was doing ayahuasca, and we had a choice. Basically, I had to make a choice to stay on Earth or to leave.
Okay.
And it was all about like really hard choices. It was A/B choices. It was not like anything in the middle. It was like, if you're gonna stay on this, then you're gonna stay on.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, I want to stay on. It's like, are you sure? Because then you're gonna have to say goodbye to everybody behind that you leave behind. And it's like, fuck, I don't want to do that. And it's like, well, there's no compromise. So it's either or. And so then, you know, I had to say good. What's that?
What'd you choose?
Well, I had to say goodbye to some people, and then it got down to one person that was very hard for me to say goodbye to her, and I was like, I don't want to say goodbye to her, and they're like, you have to choose. And I was trying to make a deal to get both.
Sure.
And while working on that deal, everything kind of evaporated, and then I was in space. So I don't know, you know, I got to keep her in my world, but I also went to space. But it was, you know, to negotiate that deal was a lot of work.
Right.
And again, that's something that might sound crazy.
No. This doesn't.
But then once I got on there, now I'm a spaceship. So now I'm this metal spaceship, this organic metal spaceship. And have you ever seen Batteries Not Included?
No.
Okay, basically there's like these little robots that come flying up, and that was kind of the visual that I had. And so the robots came up, and they were like, you know, you've got to, what do you need to work on? And it's like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but you know, the first one was like, I need to work on this, like gratitude or something. I don't know, just something. And it's like, okay, it's like starts working on it. It's like, what else do you need to work on? And then I list something, and it's like working on that. It's like, what else? And then I list something else, and I was like, what else? It's like, and then the aliens were kind of like, I'd say something. It's like, okay, seriously, you got a lot of work to be done. Like, you got a lot of issues, dude. So then they're like, anything else? And I was like, yeah, I want to work on judgment. I judge too much. And then they were like, ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. And keep in mind, this whole interaction was a total of like 15, 20 minutes.
Sure.
But they were like, oh, that's a tough one. I was like, yeah, I know, but I want to get rid of judgment. They're like, no, well, the thing is, like, that might have deeper consequences. If you get rid of judgment, you might end up becoming retarded. And I don't mean that to be insulting or whatever, but it was like, that's the language that it was using. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, and they're like socially retarded. You might become, people might not understand you.
Sure.
And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, because if you're not judging, this part of our system, part of the structure that had been built around me, at least from my perception, has been full of judgment.
Sure.
And again, if you look at like our political system, you look at using Donald
Yeah,
Trump
just
as an
you
example,
have to
it's
make
like,
some type of choices. It sounds like the whole thing is related to choice. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah.
so finally, so then I was like, yeah, I want to do this. Like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yeah. And then it was like, okay, you're gonna do this, and I'm like, yes, let me do this. And then when you get a new electronic device and it has that when you have to take that little piece of paper out from the battery.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has a warning on that saying, warning, if you pull this, you may become retarded.
Oh my God.
And I had to pull it. It's like I physically had to pull this thing in order to end judgment. And of course, it's not like you just snap out of it. Like you hear these stories about people doing ayahuasca and it's like, it changed my life right the second.
Right.
But it didn't change it like right that second. But it's these things that I still have judgment because I'm judging what's the quality of life. You still have these judgment calls, but it does start to work on. It starts to unravel things. And
well, I think I really that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that too.
Let me ask you,
what?
What's because you don't have the calling, and I totally get that and respect that. I just had a friend that I hooked up with my shaman so that she can, because she was getting the calling, and I was like, okay, now she's been talking about it for years. Like, I want to do that. I've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's that, and then finally she's like, Michael, I need to do this now. I got the calling. Can you help me? And I was like, okay, yeah. He's got one this weekend. You want to go?
Sure.
But because you don't have the calling, why do you care?
Well, I care for a couple reasons. I think I can use some type of forecasting to think that I probably will do it at some point in my life. Number one. So I like to, before I did LSD when I was 15, I read voraciously about LSD and psychedelic experiences. I just like to be prepared, even though of course, it has no real relation to actually doing the thing itself. But I like to hear the stories of it. And the second reason is just 4 of these have related to ayahuasca, people who have either had personal experiences or have done research on it. So it's just a little theme that I'm noticing emerge, which may mean something looking back upon this. But that's basically where my interest comes from that. And then also just, from hearing a few people's experiences, this is true for me. They help me too. Like what you just described is a very important kind of story, for lack of a better word, of choice, right? And judgment is always something. I've had points in my life where I can honestly say, not for very long periods of time, where I have had no judgment. And rather than it being an amazing, awesome experience, it's kind of like what those aliens told you. It's very uncomfortable. It's socially awkward. You do become retarded, not in the sense of being mentally challenged, but you're slowed down. You're not communicating as effectively because you're not making a lot of sense to people because you have no judgment. You're not, and judgment. There's two. Let's break this down. Judgment as in judging someone hey, they're doing that and that's bad. That's judging to me. Being discerning, being hey, there's fire in front of me, I'm not going to touch it. That's a judgment call, but it's using discerning. It's using wisdom and knowledge for your benefit, not being well, that fire's evil because it burned me. That's a judgment. So I want to make that distinction. But back to your question, I think I'm interested in these stories because there's always some kernel of deep truth to these experiences when people are able to, articulate you were what the experiences were about. And I just like touching upon those. So I'm supposed to ask you questions. Why are you asking me questions? This is, jeez.
I'm fixing your podcast.
Yeah.
More people will listen.
It's relatively popular, I will say. Thank you.
I heard about it on the train the other day.
Okay, so we have quite a bit of material here. We're gonna end it in a little bit, but speaking about podcasting, can you?
Oh, well, we lost 10 minutes of that.
No, I know we did, and that'll be explained. I'm gonna play. I'm gonna do an acapella song, myself singing something in between there. It'll make a nice little transition. But speaking of podcasting, you were one of the people who encouraged me to start a podcast, but also just seeing you have your own podcast was very encouraging and kind of the impetus for me to do it in some ways, because I saw you were getting all of these other things out of it. Like, it was a creative outlet, but you got to talk to people. Like, can you talk about the role podcasting has had in your life and what you've noticed, the benefits or not benefits, or just, you know, your take on podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm being all serious on this one. Questions, because we're not conversing, we're just
I'm interviewing you.
Yeah. So I told you from the beginning that the first year will change your life, and it continues to change because you're exploring things, and you're kind of, it's like hungry hippo, but instead of all moving toward the center, it's like all outwards, and you're grasping for nourishment, with all of your questions, and what the questions you don't answer get answered today that are sitting on the rest of your list. It's going to be stewing, and then you're going to have other questions. It's complicated, but you start to get, it starts to sort things out. It's really good therapy. I think one of the biggest, there's so many benefits of it too. It's weird because I was on this other podcast recently, and the person running it's like, hey, I need some images of yours. I'm doing this thing, and I really want to turn this into a money thing. And I'm like, it's not about the money. Like, it's nice because now I'm doing some, I did some public speaking. That was based off of being a guest on Duncan's show.
Cool.
But I'm getting, my artwork is selling more, and these little, like, the financial side of it. And I was trying to, I was drafting this email to send him. It's like, I get these benefits, but the real benefit is the different type of community, the way that I can talk with people, because I work in an industry, and we've talked about this before. I work in an industry where people don't really talk, and it's kind of this industry that gets shit on quite a bit because people don't know how to talk. It's a visual industry. It's based off of aesthetics and based off of what's happening in the popular culture, and it's a reflection of pop culture. It's like this like echo chamber, and occasionally, like, you scream something differently and it comes back with a different sound, and you're working in it's a special environment that I'm working around, and the community is starting to open up. When I first started this, I couldn't get people to talk. I couldn't it's really hard for me to get people to take it seriously, and I was kind of getting pushed out, squeezed out in a way from my industry, because they were like, what the fuck is he talking about this stuff publicly and openly about?
Right.
We don't talk about this stuff. We don't give the models voices, or I don't know what the thoughts was, but that's kind of the feeling that I was getting. Yeah. And the other day, I got contacted by one of the hairstylists I work with, and she's like, I'd really like to do a conversation with you on your podcast. I was an alcoholic, and I heard this other one that you did with one of the makeup artists whose father murdered her mother. I'd like to, I heard how that probably helped people. I think this could help people too. So suddenly I'm getting these interactions with my community, or the people I work with, like a total other quality of conversation.
Right.
And seeing how, I'm curious how it's going to affect you, because you have your day work, which is computer stuff.
that actually is what my professional description of job
your
is.
business card says computer
stuff. Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean. Like, you probably have people within your field, but you don't really seem to associate with them. You associate more with the teachers of entheogens and psychedelics and spirituality. So it's like, you're probably, I'm curious, like, are you going to bring in the people that do what you do for a day job, or are you going to start drifting more into the space of being, the next version of the McKenna's, or the, kind of, it's like, but the thing is, like, I don't think that's the funny thing is, I realized too, is you have to have, like, this has become a hobby for me. And if you look at, like, Joe Rogan, it's like, this is 1/3 of his work. He does his podcast, but he also does MMA, and he also does his comedy. If you look at Duncan, he does his comedy. He has his video game world, and then he has this. And, same thing. I have my photography and my artwork, and then I have my podcast, and then I have, I don't know what the hell my other third is.
Being awesome. Being
Well, no. It's like I'm trying to define that next third right now.
yeah.
But anyway, the whole thing, I don't know if this is all too long-winded,
No,
but
it's not at all. I mean, you're making me
the
think.
question is like, I started interacting with my community, which doesn't really have a voice. Like one of the characters that I'm bringing on, I don't want to say this is actually going to happen because everybody continues to fall through. One of them is so if this comes out, it's great. If it doesn't, that's what happens, or I'll get it later. Is one of the agents of one of the biggest photographers in the world who's making millions a day, and it's like, let's talk about how photography has changed and art has changed, and then bringing in a male model. Like when there's never been a male model who's we've heard speak.
That is Fabio. Fabio. Does that
Seriously, and he's a joke. Like people take
well,
him as
that
a
is
joke.
true. That is it. I can't believe it's not butter. That's his. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is like he's a butt of a joke.
Right.
And so to get, getting like an iconic male model to come in and be like, hey, this is a human fucking being.
Right.
And that was, going back to the whole mind pot thing. So when I was on there where I was, trying to figure out how this all fits together. And, we've had this discussion before too. It's like, no, maybe I'm not talking about consciousness all the time, but these are people who are not being heard.
Right.
These are human beings, and people will make jokes about male models because it's like, who the fuck cares? It's just a male model. It's like, this is a human fucking being who's trying to start a farm, who's spending he's making less. This is the one industry where men make 70% of the women, or not even that. I think it's like 60% or 50% of what women make. There's if you look at like huge ad campaigns, a male model might make like $2,000, while the female model in that same campaign might make like $3 million.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge discrepancy. And I don't know, I guess it's like I'm going on a little rant right now.
Well, no, I can sense that, but I mean, I think what you're talking about podcasting too, and how this relates, is your podcast to me seems to be about, and you've spoken about a couple concepts to me privately, and I think both of them, they hold true for you. One is the normalization of somewhat fringe or unspoken about areas. People don't have voices, and that's the other thing, is giving people voices and interviewing people who you like and think have something to offer, whether that's quote unquote spiritual or not, or consciousness related, isn't really the focal point, but in some ways it is. It's just not overtly being spoken about, and that's something I've noticed.
It goes back to what the spirit is. It's like we're all going through this experience, right? So if we're all going through this experience, but it's not seen as normal, your life is not considered normal because you haven't seen it in pop culture. And the only place that you've read about it is in a book. And the person that had that same lifestyle as you in that book, that person was a piece of shit or was treated poorly or whatever.
Sure.
I saw something on, was it Tumblr or Instagram? It was like a screenshot, and it was something about how there's like a hero character. I have not seen Star Wars, so if you've seen it, don't ruin it for me. But
I haven't seen it either, so don't ruin it.
Yeah. So basically, they said that there was a hero character in the Star Wars that they said could be the first gay hero in a movie. And I thought about that because, when I was in LA, I heard that Will Smith is gay, and that was like the big talk about in Hollywood. Like everybody talks about it openly, but no one will ever, because you can't have a gay hero, so he can't be openly gay. And I could be, Hollywood could be wrong about that. That was just a rumor that was going through there.
Sure.
But it was like, because they're like, people in the Midwest would not spend money to go see a gay hero. And here it is, like, if this is true, if Star Wars does have a gay hero, can you imagine the ramifications that could have? Because typically in the past it would be like, how many times were gay people used as the punchline,
right,
versus being a real human being? And I think that's the thing, is that I think where the PC culture with the comedy world is, where they're really struggling, is because a lot of punchlines have to be removed from people's material, because people have been punchlines for so long and they don't know how to come up with new material for this stuff. It doesn't mean that like you can't make fun of situations and things like that, but because so many people have been punchlines, well, that leaves a that's a lot of new material people have to come up with, and they don't know how to necessarily communicate that. And I don't know, I guess, with going back to the podcast thing, it is taking people who have been disenfranchised by pop culture and people who are creating pop culture that are living with cognitive dissonance, because a lot of people that are in this industry that I work in, they're good people.
Yeah.
They're good people. They do yoga and they meditate and they but then they go on retreats, they travel around the world, they're doing all this stuff, but they got to make a living and they like making art, so they
Yeah.
try to combine the two. And and that's what the podcast kind of helps too, is to show that the people that are like, no matter what situation you're in, like you're probably dealing with some form of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah,
So then-
without a doubt. I mean, if you're living in this country, I think cognitive dissonance, very rare are the people who do not experience that. It's just it's one of those things that the way our society has evolved, it yeah, it's definitely something everyone has to deal with.
Do you think that, I don't even think, do you think it's like, because everybody does, what form of cognitive dissonance is Donald Trump dealing with? Because when I look at him, I see a little scared boy who has embraced narcissism in order to fight the world. That's his superhero.
I think he's just like, he's digging what he's putting out at this point. It's like a perpetual motion machine at this point. Like, it eventually will flame out in some way, obviously. I mean, I don't think this is going to end with him being president. And even if it did, that's not going to end well. So, God, I hope he's not president, though. But my point is that I think he's just kind of buying his own hype at this point. So it's probably really fun for him.
Have you watched him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
Did you watch the Republican debates?
Yeah, of course. Of course, it's like must-see TV at this point. I mean, it is.
Did you get that sense when you watch him too? It's kind of like, there's the bullshit that he says, which is the scared little boy that's scared of people who are different than him and, wants to like be the hero.
Yeah.
But then there's this other part where you kind of get the sense that in some ways he kind of has it right.
Well,
in certain aspects where it's like, man,
it's the authenticity. He's being authentic, even if that authentic version of himself is a prick. Do you know what I mean? Like, people respect authentic people, even if they're just wildly inappropriate. But I mean, like, there's, yeah.
Well, I think I agree with you, and I think the very end of it. Sorry, not to cut you off.
No.
The very end, when they give their closing statements, he kind of had this moment where he was. And again, this is not, you're not supposed to say this around your liberal friends. And I have all the hippie liberal friends. I think I'm probably one of the liberalist, most liberal. But he had this moment at the very end where he's kind of like, if you just changed his words and he just saw what he was, the way he was saying, he's just like, guys, we're scared.
Yeah.
And we're all scared. We don't know how this is going to turn out. And I'm just going to do my best to like be strong during these times. And then it's like, oh, I like that. I like that. But I don't like the way you're approaching it.
Well, I don't know.
And I don't think that we have to be scared.
I don't know. It's just hard for me. I think everyone in life, if you have those moments where you're like, I like that person, I really like that person. They seem like a good person. And for as much as we may look at Donald Trump and be like, how could anyone think that about this person? He is not a good person. He's doing mean and bad things. Someone may be saying, he checks all the boxes that I need to have that of a good person. And those qualities you're mentioning is, a desire to keep America strong and, be protective and help and do things right and get things done and not have things be the same bullshit they always have been. Like, I can see it striking a chord with enough people to at least warrant his popularity at this point. That being said, I still, in many ways, am incredulous that it's gotten here. I think it's just more of an indictment of how fed up people are with how things have been going for the past, 50, 60 years, a really long time. But
I think the people that are really supportive of him are also the people that, I think it represents the same group. It's people who are scared of a boogeyman.
Well, yeah, because
that's the boogeyman doesn't exist. We're floating down a stream, bitches. Like, that's all it is.
I just think it's hard to convince people of that. If it's much easier to convince people to be afraid of something than it is to not be afraid of something, right? I mean, I just think that's a fact. You can come up with a lot of scary situations really quickly, and then to try to deconstruct those scary situations might be a little more difficult. So,
but that goes back to the bravery thing. It's, if everybody takes like one brave step each day, and the brave steps doesn't need to be, the brave step doesn't need to be to solve all the world's problems, but the brave step might be, I don't know, reading something that challenges you, or it could be talking to somebody who who you feel uncomfortable with. It
Well,
might be, talking to a family member that you really don't want to talk to, because it's that those brave steps add up so that we start to see that we don't need to be. There's nothing to be saved of.
Right.
The fear is just in our head. We don't really have to be brave. We just have to experience life. It's like,
so I'm going to ask you my last question now, and this is something I've been asking a lot of people. What are some practical tips that you have found in your life to kind of alleviate some of that suffering or make it a little bit easier? Just give me like one or two things. Difficult things in life, difficult situations, relationship loss, turmoil, the things that everyone has to face at one point or the other. It doesn't have to be major, but just, the uncomfortable part of time of being human. Like, what are some practical tips you got?
Practical tips of being a human being. I'm gonna actually, I stole something from you, and I stole it from one of my guests as well. I've stolen this from a lot of people, but it's as simple as gratitude. Like, if you start off the day and an offensive, grateful, you don't need to be defensive.
Yeah.
So, it's one of my guests had said, it's like one of the model's agents, like, I really need the girls to understand they just have to be grateful. If you're grateful, life lines up for you. And I was like, fuck yeah, okay. And then I started to, apply this thing. And then, I told you about my alarms that go off throughout the day for meditate. And you're like, oh, I changed those to gratitude ones.
Yeah.
Well, since then, I changed all of mine to gratitude. So so this is the practical way for your audience.
Yeah.
Our audience.
Yeah.
To do this is I have 4 or 5 alarms go off throughout the day. So I have a 9 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 1 in the evening, and then I'll have like a surprise alarm, whatever. But they basically are gratitude reminders.
Yeah.
So throughout the day, and it just says gratitude.
Yeah.
So my phone just goes off, and then I just focus for a moment on just being grateful.
Yeah.
After a while, that alarm could get annoying, and then I just be grateful for that alarm being annoying.
Sure.
But this is the thing, is I now wake up grateful. The first thing in the morning, I wake up grateful. So it's very hard for me to like steer off course when everything is amazing.
Yeah.
I've conditioned myself just to be amazed and grateful and all these things. That's so awesome. It's that's a very long-winded response.
No.
Very simple task of reminding yourself constantly to be grateful versus because then really you are in the offense. You're not in the defense of
what's gonna fuck up now. This is gonna happen. Holy shit! I listen. Perfect answer. It's it's probably the most important thing in my life that I've noticed. And I also have the alarm that goes off, and I've also gotten annoyed by it before and then marvel at that I'm getting annoyed about showing gratitude, which is a funny experience. But no,
do you wake up in the morning grateful though too now?
No, I don't. I can't say that I do.
I snap. My alarm clock is just not my phone. It's just me.
That's amazing.
I'll wake up and I'll just immediately. And I'm trying to get rid of the whole God thing, but I'll be like, thank you, God.
Right,
for
I do that.
Great thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get rid of the God thing where I'm just like, thankful. This is so great. And I'll just look around like, this is great. It'll be cloudy, and I'll have like a moment where I'm like, clouds suck. And they'll be like, no, I'm grateful for the clouds.
It's the biggest. It is truthfully, I think you've keyed into a secret of life. It's like the cheat code for life. I really, really believe that. Regardless of life circumstances, and you don't want to do it in a phony way. Like, don't force it. Don't be like, I'm grateful that I stubbed my toe. Like, if you can really get to that place, do it, of course. But like, just genuine gratitude as many times as you can throughout your life. I think just really you'd be amazed at what you notice. Because I also think gratitude does a couple of things. Obviously, you're showing appreciation and gratitude for things, but it's also a slight awareness practice. So you're being aware of having to be grateful and of things that are going on, where it just kind of jostles you out of your regular pattern of, for me at least, like you asked, do I wake up being grateful? Sometimes I do, but sometimes I'm like, fuck, I got to do a lot of shit. Ugh, I have all of these things, and it's an active battle what you would say is being on the defensive. But that's why those gratitude alarms really, really help. So awesome response. Really good. Well, thank you, Michael, for coming on. We'll definitely do this again soon. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.